Welcome to the Brooks Institute Spotlight. We're very fortunate to have Jacob Strunk, the writer and director of Valhalla, and Johnny Bishop, the director of photography for Valhalla. Through your festival screenings and other activities, this project was a finalist for the Student Academy Awards, I believe. In 2004, was it? Something like that?
I think it was 2003.
It was 2003. Could you also tell us about the other screenings and awards that you've won with this project?
Jesus. Well, like everything I've ever done in my life, it was summarily rejected by every festival to which it was submitted until the Student Academy Awards screening. It made it through a round or two to the regional screening, which I think was in Portland, Oregon, which doesn't make any sense because everyone from Washington to San Diego is looped into that. And they screened there, and one of the judges was a guy named Warren Etheridge out of Seattle, who voted for it, was disappointed when no one else did, and then invited me to come show the movie and talk about it at his festival in Seattle, which we did, and you were there.
Yep.
And then after that, for some reason, another maybe half a dozen festivals across the country wanted to show it. In the next year after that. I think it played 2 or 3 times in New York and in one of the Carolinas and Chicago. It was kind of all over. I don't know why, and I don't know why no one would show it before it got that little kind of half, I don't know, that little badge of prestige.
The Academy Award regional finalist.
The Academy Award reject. But before that, no one would show it, and then after that, it screened at a number of festivals to a number of crowds who had a handful of different reactions to it.
Well, since you touched on that, let's talk about that. One of the interesting things about Valhalla, and I've been to a few screenings with you of the film. I've also screened it myself for groups. Is how would you describe the audience reaction to Valhalla?
Other than that, it fills me with delight. There's probably, you can probably break it into thirds. There's like a third of the audience that is completely riveted and loves it in some bizarre, like jazz-scored Lynchian way. There's a third of the audience who thinks it's all right, kind of worth the middle of the shorts program that they're sitting through. And then there's a third of the audience that will get up in disgust, either because they abhor it themselves or their child has begun weeping and screaming for absolution, and that third will leave.
That's what happened to us in Seattle.
When we were in Seattle, it was kind of amazing because that context was perfect for this movie in that it was in a group of maybe 4 shorts, all of which had been hand-selected by that guy and had enough attention that people at least claimed to care because it gave them their, film IQ card. And so there was a line down the block, and during my movie, there was just this mass exodus of people getting up and walking out, either because they were bored out of their minds or offended or just, their kid had begun vomiting in their lap or something.
Right.
So all these people were getting up, but because there was a line, they were bringing more people in. And so it became this kind of joyous, like,
carousel.
It was a carousel of misery and depravity is what it was. And it was beautiful.
It was beautiful. I do remember that clearly.
I've never had that feeling again.
But you guys also got together and really wanted a filmic look, if I remember correctly, when you were shooting. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, we did in terms of, Johnny and I both came from the world of, what bizarre foreign films in widescreen can we find on VHS at the last remaining mom and pop store in town? And that was why we shot it in 235, and that was why we kind of shot it, and I should have color timed it. Like Johnny said, we should have spent as much time, if not more time, than I spent editing color timing it. But we kind of shot it like we were shooting 35 millimeter in the middle of the desert with a man on a motorcycle. And that philosophy, I guess, informed the look of it.
So I want to come back to the script and the story, because it seems to me that originally you had cast, or had wanted to cast, another actor who was a little bit older and was somebody that we had been in a film that we had shot a few weeks before, and then at the last minute that fell through, if I remember correctly. And then you approached me about acting in the piece, and we sort of did that. I don't ever recall there being a script. Am I mistaken in that? Was there?
You are mistaken in that, and we've talked about that at a number of screenings in front of people. There was actually, well, first I wanted to do it with Ethan, who was a kind of young guy, which never would have worked, like a pretty boy with long hair at, 25 or whatever he was.
Right.
Then I wanted to do it with Creepy,
Right.
who was kind of an older guy, very reserved, very put together, which would have been a great, completely different film. And then I think you and I were just standing around smoking and talking, and we had just shot your movie, and so we're talking about that. We're talking about the movie I want to do, the movie Johnny wants to do, and out of that came like, well, I can't think of who I would put in this bizarre movie in which a man sits alone and doesn't speak amidst a bunch of blood and a dead body in one room.
And I fit the part.
And you were very enthusiastic about taking that role. And it seemed like a natural fit. But there was a script. For the 20-minute film, I think it was 5 pages long.
Right.
But it really did. Right. There was no dialogue, but the script that I wrote in, half an hour, 3 days earlier, on a whim, ended up being, it really did directly translate into the version of the film that we shot and I cut and then was then shown.
That's actually something that I wanted to bring up, because I remember at the time when we were shooting it, it's like we did like one take for a lot of the stuff that we shot for Valhalla. I think there was only a couple of setups where we did 2 or 3 takes. The end dolly, I know we did a couple times, and the dragging of the body we shot a couple times. But mostly we were doing a lot of one take of stuff in there. And I remember that after you had completed the film and had that sort of first screening of it, at the time you really expressed that what you had in your head and what you and Johnny had worked with in terms of framing and dollies and camera and lighting, pretty much it ended up on the screen. Is that a correct statement to make?
I think it is, but I don't want to give the wrong impression that I think that is how films should be made. In that particular instance, I mean, the film that we ended up having is vastly different than the film I originally came up with in my head with a 25-year-old long-haired pretty boy model type doing the exact same thing. Very different, but in terms of going in, I think it was just our limited resources, our limited time, the fact that everyone was kind of working on borrowed time as a favor to me.
Right.
We didn't have any choice but to shoot one take of the shots that I knew I needed and then move on. And so we shot the edit.
Yeah. Yeah, and you actually only shot on like 2 tapes or something, right? For the whole piece or something like that?
Tape and a half.
Tape and a half.
Yeah.
So I know the question's going to come up just because it always does. And I know people have asked this question, but at the end of the day, after this film was completed, what were you trying to do with this film? What was it you were trying to either say to an audience or say as a filmmaker, or however you want to phrase that? What were you trying to do?
I mean, I guess to a certain respect, it was the usual kind of calling card theory that we all hold in our back pocket when we're going to film school, that we're going to make one short that everyone sees and everyone gives a shit about, and then people will notice that, and that will become the thing that launches us into another thing. That was part of it, it always is, but really I just wanted to make a film, and I wanted to make that film, which part of doing that film was that it was a direct response to what everyone else was doing. Right. Which is that everyone that Johnny and I were going to school with was trying to make these hit fast, Darren Aronofsky, these fast cuts and multiple frames and everything. And Johnny and I were like, fuck that, man. Just lock a camera off and have someone do something. And if it's well exposed, if it's properly framed, and if the actor is kicking ass, and if you're telling a story, you don't need anything else. Part of it was that, and it was really just that we wanted to make the movie, and like, I don't know, not to be too philosophical, but movies like that you make because you kind of have to.
Right.
It's a thing that is in you, and a thing like that you don't want to keep in you. So you channel it. You find a way to get it out into the world, and that is cathartic for you. And if other people can connect to it, then that is really the ultimate goal.
If I remember correctly, too, the 24p films are part of a contest, and Valhalla won that contest. Is that correct?
Oh yeah.
If I remember, so those 10 films that were played in the end. Once we had the final screening in the contest, I think you won $1,000 or something like that.
It was something like that. I have no idea where that $1,000 might have gone.
Oh,
but yeah.
What have you taken forward with that with the other films that you make? 'Cause I know you've done several shorts since then and just completed This Is the Place, which you were about to hit festival market with and all that kind of stuff.
Shooting Valhalla again, like I said, it came out of nowhere. Proved to me without a doubt that all you need to make a film is a good idea, a good actor, and enough people to set up a light, set up a camera, and run sound. And that is something that Johnny and I continue to do, is like, if we want to make a film, we find the best 3 people that can make the movie. Because when you have a very small crew of people that you trust, you don't fall behind, there's no drama. If you have a technical issue, you huddle, figure it out, and move on. And that was one thing I learned working on Valhalla, really, and especially where we were in the program, which was, everyone learned to gather around and work together and make this, big thing, 30 people, and that just, without a doubt, every time it imploded, and there was drama, and there were conflicts, and there were compromises, and the movie never ended up being what it could have been. Doing Valhalla and doing Johnny's movie, and even doing your movie there, it was like, how can you boil down your crew to the people that you need? Which is, it's just like doing a script or coming up with a storyboard or anything. Boil it down to exactly what you need and focus on that, and don't fuck around with all the extraneous shit. You don't need 3 people working on catering.
Right.
You need one guy who will show up with sandwiches from Subway, and everyone will bitch, and it'll be horrible, and then you'll shoot the movie, and it won't matter.
Just sort of close it out. If there's one thing you want to leave the audience with concerning the show, I'll start with you, Jakey. What would you leave them with?
If there's anything that I could take away from Valhalla, which we talked about earlier, or film school in general, it is this idea of community. I think we shot that movie with a crew of 5. It was like Johnny and our friend Bill and our friend Chris and Dale.
And Bill also played the dead guy.
Bill was the dead guy,
as he often is.
not acting, just sitting there, glaring at me because I made him act in the movie. But that was 8 years ago that we shot that movie, something like that.
Something like that.
And that is still kind of the core group of people that we work together, we work on each other's things. When jobs come up, we do that. And I think what I've learned working in LA is that unless you are born into privilege or you are born with connections that will either get you a job or give you money to make your bullshit movie or what have you, the only thing you have going for you is the group of people with which you surround yourself. And we're not famous, we're not rich, but we are willing to take bullets and arrows for each other's movies. And that was what that movie kind of solidified for us. I mean, it was like the 5th movie we had done, but on that is really when
it was
the idea of community was cemented for me. And I still have that, even now as I'm out there with all these other people are getting these big deals and writing these big movies and doing shit with celebrities. You don't need that. All you need is like 5 people willing to go out and sweat in the middle of the desert.
Such as the Salton Sea.
Exactly, for your weird little movie.
Right.
And if you have that and a good story, you're fine.